The courtroom fell into a hushed silence as Cassie stepped forward, the weight of the allegations against one of music's biggest icons hanging heavily in the air. Judge Frank Caprio leaned forward, his eyes steady yet curious. "Ms. Cassie," he said softly, "this court isn't a stage for drama." But before the gavel could drop, Cassie's calm voice cut through the tension like a clear bell. "Your Honor, what I'm about to reveal will change everything you think you know about Mr. Diddy." The room held its breath, the unexpected twist shimmering beneath her steady gaze. What followed wasn't just a courtroom hearing, it was a revelation that shocked everyone present, even the wise judge himself. Stay with us, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for the latest courtroom stories. The heavy oak doors of the courthouse creaked open, and all eyes turned toward the entrance. The murmurs that had filled the courtroom, an anxious blend of curiosity, judgment, and anticipation, quieted instantly as Cassie stepped inside. She moved with a quiet grace that seemed almost at odds with the storm swirling around her name. The tension was palpable. Whispers floated like ghosts. Cassie, Diddy, scandal, all tangled together in a web of speculation and intrigue. Cassie was dressed simply, in a soft cream sweater and well-worn jeans, her hair pulled back casually. She looked less like a woman standing at the center of a high-profile courtroom battle, and more like someone who had just come from a casual coffee catch-up with an old friend. The contrast wasn't lost on anyone. There were no flashbulbs, no designer gowns, just a woman who had been thrust into the harsh spotlight and was now facing the cold stare of justice. As she walked toward the witness stand, Cassie's eyes scanned the courtroom briefly, her gaze steady but reflective. She offered a small, polite smile to Judge Frank Caprio, who was already watching her with that trademark twinkle of compassion and wisdom. His eyes seemed to say, "I see you. I understand." Taking a deep breath, Cassie settled into the witness stand. Her voice was calm, steady, carrying the faintest hint of vulnerability beneath the surface. "I'm Cassie," she began simply. "I'm a singer, and, well, these days, I'm just hoping the truth comes out." The judge nodded encouragingly, his posture relaxed but attentive. Cassie's lips twitched into a faint, self-deprecating smile as she tried to ease the tension that had filled the room. "Honestly, I never expected my day to end up like this, sitting here, facing allegations about Sean Combs, or Diddy, as most people know him." A soft chuckle rippled through the courtroom, breaking some of the ice. Judge Caprio's own laugh was gentle, warm. "Well, Ms. Cassie," he said, "this courtroom isn't just for parking tickets and small claims. We deal with all sorts of stories here. Let's get to the heart of it." Cassie nodded, visibly gathering her thoughts. The courtroom was silent again, hanging on her every word. As she began to speak, Cassie painted a picture not just of a legal battle, but of a complicated life. She talked about her early days in the music industry, how she'd met Sean Combs, the man who was more than just a business partner, more than just a mentor. For years, he had been a guiding force, someone she trusted deeply. Their relationship was complex, layered with professional respect and personal friendship. Yet, beneath the surface, cracks had begun to appear. She described the subtle shifts, the whispered warnings from friends, the sudden changes in business dealings, the secretive phone calls, and the pressure to keep quiet. "It wasn't easy to accept," she said quietly. "There were moments when I wanted to believe it was all just a misunderstanding, that loyalty could bridge the gap between truth and deception." Cassie's tone grew more resolute. "But when the allegations started to affect people I cared about, friends, family, innocent investors, I realized I couldn't stay silent any longer." Throughout her account, Cassie revealed her human side. There was no grandstanding or melodrama, just a woman caught in a web of loyalty, betrayal, and courage. She spoke of late nights filled with doubt, of sleepless mornings wrestling with fear and hope. "It's not just about me," she said. "It's about making sure justice is served for everyone who was hurt." Judge Caprio listened intently, his expression thoughtful. Occasionally, he interjected with gentle questions, not to corner her, but to clarify and better understand the depth of her story. His approach was patient, respectful, as if reminding everyone present that behind the headlines were real people with real struggles. The courtroom spectators, usually a restless crowd, sat still, caught in the rawness of the moment. Reporters scribbled furiously, and even the legal teams took a moment to absorb the gravity of what Cassie shared. The defense attorney rose, preparing to challenge Cassie's narrative, but even in that moment, there was a palpable tension, a recognition that this was not an ordinary case. The questions would come, no doubt sharp and pointed, but Cassie seemed ready. Her demeanor was calm, steady, and authentic, a stark contrast to the storm of accusations swirling outside the courtroom walls. Judge Caprio looked over his glasses and offered a reassuring nod to Cassie. "Ms. Cassie, this court values truth above all. We'll hear all sides, but I want you to know, your voice matters here." Cassie smiled faintly, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. As the session progressed, it became clear that this was not just a courtroom battle over contracts or money. It was a story about trust and betrayal, about the personal costs behind the glitz and glamour of fame. Cassie's simple attire and steady presence belied the enormous pressure she carried, reminding everyone that justice is not just about power or celebrity. It's about humanity. And with that, the stage was set. The courtroom was ready to hear the full story, not just of business dealings and scandals, but of a woman's fight to bring light to the shadows. The courtroom air shifted as the prosecutor stood deliberately, buttoning his jacket with a practiced ease. All eyes turned toward him, sensing the formal turning point of the hearing. The once murmuring crowd fell silent, expectant of the first official challenge. "Ms. Cassie," the prosecutor began, his voice steady but edged with skepticism, "you stand accused of fabricating claims about Sean Combs's involvement in a business scandal that has deeply affected dozens of investors. The evidence you say you possess has never surfaced publicly. Can you explain why that is?" The question hung heavy in the air. The judge's gaze settled on Cassie, giving her the floor with a calm nod. Cassie inhaled deeply, steadying herself before responding. Her voice was clear, calm, and carefully measured. "Your Honor, I understand the gravity of these claims. I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe this truth needed to come to light. The situation is far more complicated than what meets the eye, and quite frankly, silence has protected the wrong people for too long." A subtle murmur rippled through the courtroom as Cassie's words hinted at the complexity beneath the headline scandal. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Sounds like we're digging into some deep music industry secrets, Ms. Cassie," he said lightly, attempting to ease the tension, but also signaling that this court was ready to hear the unvarnished truth. Cassie allowed herself a faint smile in return. "Yes, Your Honor. The music industry isn't just about beats and performances. It's also about deals made behind closed doors. What I'm here to reveal goes beyond just business. There are personal betrayals tangled up with those hidden contracts and financial maneuvers." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow but remained composed, sensing the tide was shifting slightly. Cassie's words painted a broader picture, one that went beyond cold numbers and legal jargon. The defense attorney, sitting to Cassie's left, shifted in his chair, a subtle sign of discomfort. He adjusted his tie and leaned forward, clearly preparing to dismantle her narrative. "But Ms. Cassie," he interjected smoothly, These so-called hidden contracts and personal betrayals you mention sound more like gossip than facts. People protect their brands, yes, that's business. But baseless accusations can ruin reputations and careers. Why should this court trust you over the countless professionals who have vouched for Mr. Combs's integrity? Cassie looked at him steadily, unwavering. Because I'm not here to destroy reputations without cause. I'm here to expose truths that have been kept in the dark, truths that have harmed innocent investors and friends who trusted the system. She paused, the courtroom hanging on her next words. People don't want this out because it threatens the image of power and success. But I can't stay quiet anymore, not when so many have been hurt. Judge Caprio nodded thoughtfully, folding his hands on the bench. Ms. Cassie, it's rare this court hears cases involving such high-profile individuals and complex allegations. But, at its heart, this isn't about celebrity or scandal. It's about truth and justice. Would you agree? Cassie's eyes shone with conviction. Exactly, Your Honor. That's what this is about, making sure justice is served, no matter who it involves. The prosecutor leaned forward, flipping through a sheaf of documents. Ms. Cassie, can you provide any concrete evidence to support these serious claims? We've seen only vague allegations so far. Cassie nodded. Yes, I can. I've gathered financial documents, email correspondences, and witness testimonies that demonstrate the flow of money and the efforts to cover it up. But these documents don't tell the full story. The silence around them does. She took a moment to gather her thoughts, then continued. What you're seeing here is just the tip of the iceberg. There are people inside the organization who have been pressured to stay silent, threatened even. But those whispers turned into losses for investors who trusted blindly. The courtroom was rapt. The defense attorney shot a quick glance at his client's legal team, who were busy reviewing the materials Cassie had handed over earlier. Judge Caprio's voice cut through the tension again. Ms. Cassie, the court recognizes the difficulty of speaking out when powerful forces want to keep things hidden. Your courage is noted. But we must weigh every piece of evidence carefully. Can you tell us more about these pressures you mentioned? How did they affect you personally? Cassie's expression darkened for a moment, her voice softening. I was isolated, Your Honor. Friends I trusted stopped returning calls. I received warnings disguised as advice to keep quiet. Even my career opportunities were suddenly limited. It felt like an invisible wall closing in. She looked around the courtroom, eyes briefly moist, but resolute. But none of that stopped me, because I realized the people who mattered, the innocent investors, the fans, the truth itself, deserved to know what was really happening. Judge Caprio nodded slowly, impressed by her honesty and resolve. The path you've taken is not an easy one. It's a reminder that justice sometimes asks the brave to stand alone against overwhelming odds. The prosecutor, though skeptical, acknowledged the seriousness of her testimony. Ms. Cassie, your story is compelling, but the burden of proof remains. This court will examine the evidence thoroughly. Cassie replied simply, and I am ready to answer any questions and provide whatever is needed to ensure the truth prevails. The judge's voice softened. In this courtroom, truth is the guiding light. This hearing will continue until every stone is turned. The room settled into a focused quiet. Even the spectators seemed drawn into the gravity of the moment, a story far more complex than headlines suggested, revealing the human cost behind the music industry's glittering surface. A subtle shift rippled through the courtroom, a change in atmosphere so quiet, yet profound, that even the slightest whisper was swallowed by the weight of the moment. Cassie's voice, which had been firm and resolute moments before, now softened, as if peeling back a layer that few had been allowed to see. Before all this, she began, her words low but clear. Before the business deals, the money, and the endless headlines, I was just a young woman with a dream. The courtroom leaned in instinctively, as if drawn by an invisible thread to the heart of her story. The buzz of whispers faded into a respectful silence. I trusted him, Cassie continued, eyes flickering with a mix of fondness and pain. Sean, he wasn't just a business partner. To me, he was a mentor, a friend, someone who believed in my potential when others didn't. She paused, taking a breath as if to steady the tide of emotions swelling inside. When I started to see the cracks, the small inconsistencies, the hushed conversations, I wanted so badly to believe it was all just a misunderstanding. Her voice faltered slightly, the weight of that hope and subsequent betrayal palpable. The courtroom's usually restless crowd was motionless, caught in the vulnerability of a woman wrestling with shattered trust. Judge Frank Caprio's expression softened, his eyes reflecting genuine empathy. "Trust is a fragile thing," he said gently, "especially in a world where business and friendship often walk a razor's edge." Cassie looked around the courtroom, her gaze sweeping the rows of faces, some skeptical, some sympathetic, all now witnesses to the human side of a story often reduced to scandal and headlines. "I kept silent for years," she admitted quietly. "Afraid of what might happen if I spoke out, afraid of losing everything I'd worked for. Fear is a powerful thing. It can chain you in place, even when you know something's wrong." A soft murmur spread, but it was quickly hushed by the gravity of her next words. "But then, innocent people started losing everything," Cassie said, her voice steady once more, yet threaded with emotion. "Friends, family, people who trusted the system, who trusted the promises made. I realized it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about justice, and justice demands truth, no matter how difficult." The courtroom felt as if it were holding its breath. What had been a legal battle of accusations and denials was now unmistakably a story of human conflict, loyalty tested, betrayal endured, and courage summoned. Cassie's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she refused to break. "I wanted to protect the ones I cared about, but silence was protecting the wrong people, enabling harm to continue. So, I decided to speak up, even if it meant standing alone." Judge Caprio nodded solemnly, his voice filled with warmth and understanding. "Your courage in speaking truth to power is a reminder to all of us that behind every headline is a person, complex, flawed, but striving for justice." For a moment, the courtroom was united in silent respect. The story had moved beyond mere allegations. It had become a testament to human resilience and the difficult choices faced when loyalty conflicts with morality. The prosecutor's face softened as well, and even the defense team appeared momentarily subdued, confronted with the raw honesty laid bare. Cassie took a deep breath, then added, "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I believe in accountability, in fairness, and in making sure no one else suffers in silence." The judge's eyes scanned the room, locking briefly with Cassie's. "That is the essence of justice, balancing the scales not with anger or hatred, but with truth and compassion." As the court prepared to move forward, the emotional weight lingered, a powerful reminder that in the pursuit of justice, human stories often carry the deepest truths. Judge Frank Caprio sat quietly for a moment, his hands folded on the polished wooden bench before him. The courtroom, charged with the intensity of the testimony and revelations so far, seemed to collectively exhale in anticipation. There was a weight to the moment, not just a legal reckoning, but a profound human struggle playing out before everyone's eyes. "This courtroom," Judge Caprio began softly, his voice resonant yet gentle, "sees a great many cases every year. Some are straightforward, parking tickets, minor disputes. Others carry more complexity. But few cases touch on the deep, painful struggle between personal loyalty and moral duty, quite like this one. He paused briefly, allowing the gravity of his words to settle. His gaze met Cassie's, who listened intently, her expression a mixture of hope and anxiety. Then, turning slightly to address everyone present, he continued, "Ms. Cassie, seeking the truth is noble and necessary. But carrying the heavy burden of betrayal, that is something else entirely. It can weigh on a person's heart and conscience like nothing else." The courtroom was silent, every ear tuned to the judge's words, sensing a moment of real humanity behind the legal proceedings. "How often," Judge Caprio mused aloud, "do we find ourselves caught in that agonizing position, torn between protecting someone we care about and who has perhaps protected us, and standing firmly for what is right? It's never a simple choice. The heart pulls one way, and conscience pulls the other." He leaned forward slightly, the warmth in his eyes unmistakable. This is where justice becomes more than just the application of laws or contracts. Justice becomes about people, about their pain, their fears, and their courage. He cleared his throat and began to share a personal story from his decades on the bench, a tale that resonated deeply with the case before him. "Years ago," Judge Caprio recalled, "a young man came before me accused of a serious offense. He was quiet, scared, but what struck me was the way his eyes betrayed a deeper conflict. He had stood by a friend through thick and thin, but when that friend broke the law, he faced a choice: to protect loyalty or to tell the truth." The judge's voice softened, recalling the memory. He chose to speak out, even though it meant turning his back on someone he loved. It wasn't easy. He lost friends, respect, and peace of mind. But he told me later, "Your Honor, I had to do what was right, even if it hurt." A murmur of understanding passed through the courtroom. The story's raw honesty struck a chord. Judge Caprio's gaze swept the room once more. Justice requires courage, not just for those who speak in court, but for all of us when faced with difficult truths in our daily lives. He turned back to Cassie. "Your courage in coming forward reflects that same struggle. It is a reminder to us all that the path to justice is rarely clear or easy." The judge's eyes lingered on the documents before him, then back to Cassie. "The court recognizes that beyond the headlines, beyond the accusations, this is a story about human beings, about trust broken and truths revealed, and that makes all the difference." The room remained still, the weight of the moment filling every corner. Even the prosecutor appeared to be reflecting on the deeper implications of the case. "Ms. Cassie," Judge Caprio continued, "this court will consider the evidence with an open heart and mind. But I want you, and everyone here, to remember that justice is not simply about winning or losing. It's about restoring balance, healing wounds, and, when possible, finding forgiveness." He gave a small, knowing smile. Sometimes, the hardest part of justice is not the verdict itself, but the understanding that even in judgment, we are all flawed, all human. As he concluded, the judge's words echoed in the silence that followed, leaving the courtroom filled with a reflective, almost reverent atmosphere. It was a reminder that behind every case lies the complexity of human emotions, choices, and consequences. The hearing was poised now at a crossroads, not just between accusation and defense, but between mercy and accountability, between the past and the hope for a better future. With that, Judge Caprio tapped his gavel lightly and said, "Let us proceed, with the same spirit of truth and fairness guiding our steps." The courtroom atmosphere, previously heavy with reflection and quiet resolve, shifted dramatically. The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface now crackled like electricity through the air. All eyes turned sharply toward Cassie's defense table as her lawyer rose, a folder clutched firmly in hand. "Your Honor," the lawyer began, voice steady but urgent, "we have obtained new evidence that directly relates to the core of this case, evidence that was concealed until now. I ask the court's permission to present this." Judge Caprio regarded him thoughtfully, his fingers lightly tapping the bench. "Proceed," he said, his tone measured but tinged with intrigue. The lawyer carefully opened the folder and withdrew a printed email thread, the pages crisp and seemingly authentic. "This," he explained, "is a series of internal communications between top executives at the company involved. They reveal deliberate concealment of financial transactions and explicit instructions to keep certain investors in the dark." The room stirred. A low murmur passed through the courtroom as the reality of the situation deepened. Cassie sat forward, eyes locked on the documents now finally in the light. For years, she had spoken in whispers and hints. Now, here was undeniable proof. Judge Caprio raised an eyebrow, the familiar glint of sharp intellect and curiosity flickering in his eyes. "Well now, this changes things," he said softly, yet firmly. Cassie's lips parted slightly, a breath she seemed to have been holding for a long time finally escaping. Her eyes glistened, not with tears this time, but with a flood of relief and cautious hope. "This," she said quietly, "this is what I've been trying to show all along. The truth buried beneath layers of silence and carefully crafted deception." The defense attorneys exchanged uneasy glances, their composure rattled by the unexpected turn. One quickly stood, attempting to challenge the document's authenticity. "Your Honor, we must examine the validity of these emails. They could be forged or taken out of context." Judge Caprio nodded, acknowledging the importance of due process. "Of course, all sides will have their say. This court values fairness above all else. But this evidence must be examined carefully and thoroughly." He looked back at Cassie and her lawyer. "We will allow a full review, including expert testimony to verify the documents. The integrity of this process is paramount." The courtroom buzzed with renewed energy. Reporters scribbled frantically, spectators leaned in closer, and even the judge's usual steady staff seemed charged by the unfolding drama. The case, which until now had been a steady unraveling of allegations and counterclaims, had suddenly shifted gears into something much bigger, much more consequential. Cassie's lawyer began reading excerpts aloud, revealing a chilling pattern of emails, orders to obscure financial dealings, instructions to silence employees who asked too many questions, and a clear strategy to protect the company's executives, even at the expense of unsuspecting investors. With each new revelation, the faces in the courtroom shifted. Some looked stunned, others grim, but all felt the unmistakable pull of the story's truth beginning to break free from the shadows. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly, allowing the weight of the evidence to sink in. "It's one thing to accuse," he said, voice steady, "but to bring forth proof, that is a game changer." Cassie's eyes briefly met the judge's. In that glance was a silent gratitude, gratitude that after so much struggle, the truth had finally found a way to the surface. The prosecution team immediately signaled their intent to investigate the documents thoroughly, calling for financial experts and forensic analysts to testify in the coming days. The defense, meanwhile, prepared to mount a rigorous challenge, vowing to scrutinize every detail. Judge Caprio raised his gavel. "This court will recess to allow time for the evidence to be examined. But let this be clear. Truth and justice must guide us through the coming days." As the judge's words echoed through the room, a palpable sense of anticipation hung in the air. What began as a quiet accusation had now become a full-scale battle for transparency, accountability, and justice. Cassie sat back, her shoulders finally relaxing for the first time in the proceedings. For all the years she had battled alone in silence, she now felt a shift, not just in the case, but within herself. The fight was far from over, but the tide was turning. Outside the courtroom, whispers would soon spread. This case, once just another headline, had transformed into a pivotal moment where courage, truth, and resilience would collide, and the outcome could ripple far beyond these walls. Judge Caprio watched as the courtroom began to empty, but the intensity remained. He knew this turning point would mark a new chapter, one where the law's blindfold might be lifted just enough to see the full picture, and where justice would demand more than words. Judge Frank Caprio leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed gently on Cassie. The courtroom had shifted again, from the tense battle of evidence to a moment of genuine humanity. This was a space where justice met empathy, where the law embraced the complexities of the human spirit. "Ms. Cassie," Judge Caprio began, his voice warm and steady, "your courage in bringing this truth to light is truly commendable. It takes a rare kind of bravery to stand alone against powerful forces, especially when those forces can shake your world." Cassie's shoulders, which had been tight with stress, seemed to ease just a bit at the judge's acknowledgement. Her voice was quieter now, more reflective. "Thank you, Your Honor. I just want people to know what's really going on. It's been hard, but necessary." The judge nodded, as if he understood far more than what was said. "This court's role," he said thoughtfully, "is not simply to punish wrongdoing or to acquit the innocent. It is also to understand, to seek fairness and equity where injustice has taken root." He paused, allowing the weight of those words to sink in. "Behind every headline, every news story, every scandal," Judge Caprio continued, "there are real people. People who are sometimes broken, sometimes brave, sometimes both at once." His voice softened as he spoke directly to Cassie, but also to everyone in the courtroom. "Ms. Cassie, today you have reminded us all that truth requires sacrifice and justice requires compassion." The judge's words held a profound truth. Justice was not a cold calculation, but a living, breathing process. It was about recognizing pain, forgiving faults, and striving to heal wounds, as much as it was about applying the law. Cassie's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but she held her composure. "It means a lot to hear that," she said quietly, "because this has been more than just a legal fight. It's about people's lives, their futures." Judge Caprio nodded gravely. "And that is why this court will continue to weigh every piece of evidence carefully, listen to every voice, and deliver a judgment that honors both the law and the human condition." He glanced briefly toward the defense and prosecution tables. "Let us all remember, no matter the outcome, that fairness is the foundation of our justice system, and fairness must include empathy." The courtroom felt imbued with a sense of calm resolution, a collective understanding that this case transcended the usual boundaries of courtroom drama. It was a story about courage, sacrifice, and the pursuit of truth in the face of daunting odds. Judge Caprio took a moment to acknowledge the many unseen battles behind the scenes, the whistleblowers, the quiet witnesses, the families affected, and even the defendants. "Justice," he said, "is never easy. It often asks us to look beyond what is comfortable, beyond what is convenient." He leaned back, the familiar twinkle returning to his eyes. "But that is what makes it worthwhile." Cassie breathed deeply, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but she no longer felt alone in her fight. As the judge prepared to move the court toward its next steps, he offered a final word of encouragement. May this case remind us all that truth and justice are a shared responsibility, a promise we make to each other as a society. The courtroom slowly began to stir, the moment of empathy and resolution giving way to the practical business of law. Yet, the warmth of Judge Caprio's words lingered in the air, a gentle reminder that justice is not just about right and wrong, but about the humanity that binds us all. As the final echoes of the courtroom proceedings faded, the room remained charged with a profound sense of reflection. This was not merely the conclusion of a legal hearing, it was the closing of a chapter in a story that had touched many lives in ways far beyond what appeared on the surface. The crowd slowly dispersed, whispers following behind like a gentle breeze, carrying fragments of what had transpired. But for those who had been present, the experience lingered long after the gavel had fallen. Cassie's voice, steady and clear throughout the trial, had opened doors that had long been sealed shut. Doors to hidden financial dealings, to the uncomfortable truths behind glossy headlines, and to the vulnerable human beings who had borne the brunt of silence and deceit. It was a reminder that the law is never just about numbers or contracts. It's about people. People with dreams and fears, hopes and heartbreaks. And in this courtroom, Judge Frank Caprio had shown that justice is not blind, as so many believe. Rather, justice sees, it feels, it listens. He had looked beyond the surface, beyond the allegations and the defenses, to the heart of the matter, the delicate, fragile interplay of truth and trust. The case transcended the familiar narrative of business scandals and celebrity controversies. It became a powerful story of trust, broken, courage found, and the unyielding quest for truth in the face of overwhelming odds. Cassie's journey, from hopeful artist to reluctant whistleblower, reminded everyone present that sometimes standing up for what is right means risking everything. It means navigating a path fraught with uncertainty, fear, and isolation. But it also means the possibility of healing, of restoring justice not only in the courtroom, but in the hearts of those affected. Judge Caprio's calm, measured words throughout the trial were a beacon in a storm of accusations and denials. He embodied the principle that the law must be tempered with compassion, that understanding the human condition is as vital as interpreting statutes. The courtroom had witnessed more than a clash of legal arguments. It had become a stage for empathy, courage, and moral reckoning. For the public outside, the story would be distilled into headlines and sound bites. But for those who saw the full picture, it was clear. Justice is never just about winning or losing. It is about truth, fairness, and the humanity at the core of every case. As the courtroom lights dimmed and the doors closed behind the last departing visitors, the echoes of this case would continue to resonate. Not as a mere footnote in legal history, but as a powerful testament to the enduring strength of truth and the compassionate spirit of justice. This was a reminder that even in the most complex, high-profile cases, the essence of justice remains profoundly human. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Cassie's place? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a moment from Judge Caprio's courtroom. Justice is a journey we take together. Stay with us for more stories that reveal the heart behind the law.